Craig here on the third floor. Welcome to episode 3, where Ray and I break down the schemes and strategies in Malifaux 3rd edition. How do you score points and win games in M3e? Don't forget to rate and write a review for us. You know you're our favorite listener, and this will help us find more people almost as cool as you are. Enjoy the episode. There are few things better than sitting at a table, unplugging, and going to battle with some friends. Welcome to another episode of Tabletop Talk. If you're looking for strategies, reviews, and tips on everything related to board games, card games, and miniature games like Malifaux, you are in the right place. This episode is a direct port from one of our YouTube videos. Be sure to subscribe to the Third Floor Wars YouTube channel. The link is in the show notes.
Howdy folks, Craig and Ray here on the third floor. We're going to take a couple minutes and talk about the strategies and schemes that we're seeing in the 3rd edition of Malifaux. We're currently in the open beta. We're filming this in mid to late January, so things may be changing from what you see here, but we thought we'd take a first look and give our thoughts. So Ray, in general, let's talk about just the overall structure of how the strategies and schemes work.
So we have a total of 8 points, victory points that are possible every game that you're going to play. Playing in 5 rounds. And the way the strategies work is they're on a sliding scale. So the first point you get is fairly easy to get. Second point's fairly easy. But after that, the third and fourth points you're really going to have to fight for, because you have to, at whatever the strategy you're doing, you kind of have to succeed at it more than you did previously to score the next point. And we'll go over the details about that in a second.
So it's 4 points for strategies.
4 points for strategies.
And then you pick 2 schemes?
2 schemes, flipping 5 schemes, and you pick 2 of those for your pool. And you get a maximum of 2 points per scheme.
Okay.
You get a reveal, and that'll give you 1 point. Again, the reveals are fairly easy to do. And then you get a second point for an end game condition, regardless of how many rounds you go. So if we're talking tournament play and you only get to round 3, then that's when it's going to trigger. So that's definitely makes it a lot tougher.
Right.
So
it sounds like really kind of getting those 4 points is a somewhat reasonable expectation.
Yeah.
2 from the strategy, 1 from each scheme, but it's getting that 5th, 6th.
It's the 5th or 8th. Yeah, okay. The 5th or 8th is really where it's going to come down to. So.
And we got a little bit of a unique perspective because Ray's been very involved in the beta, both the closed beta and the open beta. I have yet to play any games of the 3rd edition, so it will be kind of 2 different perspectives on it.
If you're an athlete, you know the greatest motivator of all is the fear of letting your teammates down. After all, a team is only as good as its weakest link. So you owe it to those wearing the same jersey as you to be your best every time you step on the field. That's why there's no vape in team. When you vape, you can expose your lungs to toxic chemicals that can damage your lungs. If you're a step behind, the team's a step behind. Brought to you by The Real Cost and the FDA.
So let's start off and let's talk about the different strategies. So I'm going to start off with the first one, Turf War. You start off by dividing the table into 4 open table quarters. In the center of each table quarter, you place a neutral strategy marker. Place another neutral strategy marker in the center of the table. Strategy markers are impassable. So that's 5 strategy markers total, right? Yep. Mm-hmm. 1 in each quarter and then 1 in the center.
And I want to draw specific attention to the impassable. That's a very big deal.
Yeah. And 30 millimeter, because by default all markers are 30 millimeter.
Unless specified otherwise.
Right. And strategy markers can be either friendly, neutral, or enemy. A strategy marker friendly to one player is the enemy to the other, and vice versa. A model can make an interact action, targeting a strategy marker and base contact with it to change its alignment from enemy to neutral or from neutral to friendly. So you interact with it and you flip it, right?
Basically.
So if it's neutral, it becomes friendly. Mm-hmm. If it's enemy, it becomes friendly.
No, if it's enemy, it becomes neutral.
Oh, okay. So it takes 2 interacts to make it friendly.
It takes 2 interacts.
Gotcha.
Which is a big deal.
I bet.
That's a huge deal. But the next part makes it a little bit more interesting.
So when a friendly model kills an enemy model, it can change 1 strategy marker in the same table quarter as the killed model from the enemy to neutral. If possible, the marker in the center is considered to be in every table quarter. So wow. So you kill a model, mm-hmm. and if you kill a model where there's a friendly marker, it can be turned to neutral.
Yeah.
Or an enemy marker. It can be turned to neutral. And with that center being in all quarters, that's always available.
Yeah, it's always available. So it's like trying to lock down the center. It's the center marker for me has really kind of always been a very much a win more kind of situation. If you're able to hold that center marker, it probably means you're in a pretty good position. M3e doesn't have as much killing as you would think, despite the amount of engagements and being able to walk and charge.
Yep.
You're still only swinging once. Engagement ranges are between 0 to 1 mostly. There's not that many 2 inches so it's one of those situations where you're not killing as much as you think you're going to kill, but this strategy really rewards you for intelligent killing.
Gotcha. So you have the option of either interacting or killing, either one. Right. But the key is that to make it friendly, you have to interact because you can't do that by killing.
Correct. You absolutely have to. So it's got to be that balance. You can't just come in, I'm going to murder everything and it's going to be great. You still got to be able to have those action points to be able to flip it to score.
Got it. So if a model's in more than one table quarter, the model that killed it might decide which table quarter the model is on. So boy, not only that, but you've got models that are vulnerable. You have to worry about where they are too.
Absolutely, and large bases really suffer here sometimes because you end up in that situation where there's not a ton of pushes in M3e, but there's enough.
Right.
And there's enough repositioning in M3e. And there's a couple of factions that are really, really good at marking things off, Neverborn with Euripides, or most of the 10T factions got a lot of repositioning. You got the Bells, in Rezzers, and other models and factions have this ability to just make slight movement changes. And being able to take a big model and throw it on the middle line, on one of those dissecting lines, and then take it out is potentially huge.
Yeah.
Because not every model that's big is a high cost model that's hard to kill. There's quite a few 40 and 50 mils that are still relatively easy to put down because they're either scheme runners or they're support pieces.
Sure, or you've worn them down, right?
Yeah, or you've just worn them down through the natural course of the play. So it's this gets really tough when you start getting to turns 4 and 5 because you start running out of models at a certain point. So action point economy, action point efficiency is really, really important. And it's one of the reasons I really like the new Turf War, is because it really rewards you for resource management, which is one of the aspects of Malifaux that we all love, is kind of you got your cards, you got your stones, you got your models, you got your AP, and that really, this one definitely exemplifies all of that.
Yeah, it's interesting because it sounds like initially it's board control and killing. But in reality, positioning is huge because I was just thinking about if I kill an enemy model that's on one of those lines, I now have 3 potential markers I could flip. My choice of 3, one in each quarter as well as that central one still.
It also rewards ranged a lot too if you very calculated range.
Oh yeah,
ranged
good point. Good point. So it mentions that if a model's in more than one table quarter, you get to choose, and then at the end of each turn, this is how it's actually scored. At the end of each turn, a crew gains 1 victory point if it has more friendly strategy markers than it has scored VP for this strategy, and that's when you're talking about the ramping.
Yeah, that's the ramp.
So I just need 1 friendly, or let's see, 1 friendly to get a point.
Yep.
Then I need 2 friendlies to get the second point.
Yep.
And then so on and so forth.
So on and so forth.
So to get that 4th point, I need 4 friendlies out of the 5.
Right. And the thing that's really interesting about this concept that all the strategies do with this kind of sliding scale is that if you miss a turn, you've missed it. It's there. You can't get all 4 victory points prior to turn 5 because one of the big things that we haven't mentioned is that you can't score points on turn 1. So you start on turn 2. So in the case of Turf War, turn 2, you need 1 marker.
Yep.
You score that, turn 3, you need 2 markers. So that means to get the full 4 points, you have to score Turf War every single turn. And that's what makes these so difficult, is that you can't, it's not a situation where it's well, I missed this turn, so I'll just kind of try to double up next turn. You can't double up because the threshold that you're trying to beat was the score you had previously.
Right. But I think another aspect that would be interesting, too, is that catching up isn't as difficult as it might have been otherwise, right? So let's say turn 2 you score, turn 3 you score.
Right.
Come turn 4, you're going to have to get 3 markers.
Right.
You
still only need 1.
Right.
And that definitely enters play a lot.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of close games where that has been the case, where you think you got full control over everything, but then when you try to get that 3rd marker, and it really rewards good deployment. It rewards good crew construction, building to the strategy. It's really, it's always an important thing. But you feel a little bit more rewarded here when you deploy well and stuff like that. Because in standard deployment is a prime example. It's I think it's 10 inches up the board. It's 8 or 10 inches up the board.
Yeah.
It's 8 inches up the board. And then, so these markers halfway and a quarter are, I think, 9 inches up.
Got it.
So you can have a model move interact turn 1. So you've got 2 markers on a standard deployment on your side of the board. You can flip immediately. So trying to get those 2 points there is pretty easy, but trying to deny those 2 points can be kind of hard.
Right.
But the person who positions, deploys, and uses the tools from their faction well enough to deny that turn 2 or turn 3 score, that person's in a great position.
Tell you what else I like about it, and I really, having read all of these, have kind of felt it, and what I'm hearing too is that you're encouraged to get across to the other side of the board.
Absolutely,
right?
100%.
So in your scenario, turn 1, we both flip our 2 markers. Then we're pushing to the center and pushing to the other quarter to try to deny.
Yeah, absolutely. Denial is a huge part of M3e.
Very, very cool. So that's Turf War. Let's talk Plan Explosives. This is the one on the Tome. Turf War was on the Ram. After deployment, starting with the player with the initiative, each player alternates placing explosive tokens on their deployed models until each player has placed a total of 5 explosive tokens on their models. So you've deployed, you've got your models, and you've got a total of 5 markers. You can put as many as you want on a single model.
No, you can actually.
You can't.
Yeah, that's actually the next best.
Up to 1 explosive token can be placed on each minion. Up to 2 explosive tokens can be placed on each enforcer, henchman, or master. I got it. So they're going to be somewhat spread around.
And that's really good design on Wyrd's part for that concept because, you know, like you were just saying, you can load up like a super tank and be like, this guy's going to be the one that deploys it, and you can't do that here because you've got to be able to spread them out. Now, I've commonly put 2 on like an enforcer or a henchman, or especially if I have a mobile master type thing. Like I play 10 Thunders primarily. So Masaki.
I'm going to interrupt you just a second. Let's quickly build through because I'm very interested in hearing how these strategies work. A model with one or more explosive tokens can take an interact action to discard an explosive token and place a strategy marker in base contact with itself. Strategy markers cannot be placed within 6 inches of another friendly strategy marker. So we're going out and we're deploying the bombs.
100%.
A model in base contact with a strategy marker can take an interact action to discard the strategy marker and gain an explosive token. So you can drop them and pick them up.
And I think the big key to take away there is that strategy markers aren't, it doesn't matter what type. It doesn't matter if it's friendly or enemy.
It doesn't matter who owned the bomb.
It doesn't matter who owned the bomb.
Got it.
Yeah, what matters is that the bomb's on the field now. Anyone can go by and pick it up now.
Got it. If a model with 1 or more explosive tokens is killed, a model in the opposing crew that is within 3 inches of the killed model may gain the killed model's explosive tokens. Otherwise, they're discarded. So that's interesting. Okay. At the end of each turn, a crew gains 1 victory point if there are more strategy markers on the opponent's half of the table than the crew has earned victory points from the strategy. Strategy markers on the center line count as being on both table halves. Wow. Okay.
So you were talking about the last one about the whole concept of having to push into your other opponent's side of the table. Like this is it here. Like, this is absolutely the king of the crop there.
So you were saying about 10 Thunders.
So in 10 Thunders we have Masaki, and I don't want to talk too much about it. We can do that elsewhere. But she can carry 2 bombs. And then she has her whole thing where she can bury and then pop up by a shadow marker. So like there's specific models that you're going to want to drop 2 bombs on. Like she's a great example of one because she's just going to get past the enemy and then drop a bomb and then bury her, pop up, 10, 12, 14 inches away or whatever, shenanigans that she can do, and drop her the other bomb. And it's kind of, the opponent really has to dedicate resources to kind of go after that. So mobility is a huge player in the Plan Explosives scheme. But the thing about that's interesting is that 6-inch requirement, it comes in way more often than you think it will. Because the game still, you still have the other schemes that you got to be trying to do, and a lot of them encourage engaging with your opponent. And then of course there's the whole, if you disengage, you can't take an interact action. So if someone ties you up, you're not dropping a bomb that turn unless someone else kills that model before your bomb carrier activates. Or they have Don't Mind Me or something of that nature. And then the other thing that's really, really cool about the strategy is that whole counterplay where you might drop a bomb on a line because that's how you got to get that point, but maybe I come in the next turn, first activation, pick that bomb right up, and now you've got to drop 2 bombs. And they're a limited resource. And again, this is a range thing that, you can, if you're really cagey with how you do your range stuff, Being able to snipe out a bomb carrier, even though you don't get the bomb, you deny your opponent one. And if you deny your opponent 2 bombs, you've denied them 1 victory point.
Yep.
Just flat out, they can't get that 4th victory point.
Interesting.
So it can be very, very hard to score more than 2 points on this, because people can take your bombs, steal your bombs, and then you're in a situation where you're like, well, my opponent's got 6 bombs and I have 2, and I need 3. So now who do I have to kill to steal their bomb? Or where do I have to get to pick up my opponent's bomb just to be able to keep scoring this scheme?
So whenever I read, a strategy. Yeah, whenever I read a strategy or schemes, one of the things I try to think about is, how is this going to impact how I build my crew? And what I find immediately interesting about this is, my first thing is mobility, right?
Absolutely.
But then 100%. I think a little bit more about it, and I go, well, tankiness would be good.
Yeah.
And then I think, well, being killy would be good.
Yeah.
And then I think, well, being able to kill close would be good, because I'm picking up potential bomb markers. Having some scheme runners would be good,
right?
Because then I can run, and it's just like, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that there's several different angles.
Yeah, you can absolutely take multiple vectors on it, and I have taken multiple vectors with clan explosives. I've done from the Yonlo super tank to, here's Lynch just going to, murder anything that gets near him with Huggy, and it's like, they all seem to work. And I played into Guild a lot, and their range thing where it's like, you know what, that's a bomb carrier, that's a minion, I'm just going to snipe it off the table with all of my focus range shots and deny you a bomb. And it's like, it puts pressure on you.
Sure. Very, very cool. All right, we've got 2 more to go. Corrupted Idols, this is the one on the mask. At the start of each turn, after determining which player has initiative, place a strategy marker centered on the center line. The location of the strategy marker is determined by the suit of the initiative flip of the player with initiative, and the direction is calculated from that player's perspective. So on a mask, it goes 8 inches from where the center line meets the board edge. Tome, 8 inches from where the center line meets the board edge on the right. On a ram, it's on the center. On a crow, where the center line meets the table edge, the player with initiative chooses which table edge, and on a joker, you reflip. So 1 marker.
1 marker.
And it's constantly being deployed at the beginning. Now, I guess we'll get into it, but if the strategy marker would be placed on top of an existing strategy marker, the player with initiative instead places the strategy marker evenly on the center line, touching but not overlapping the existing strategy marker and not overlapping any other strategy markers. If this is not possible, the strategy marker is not placed.
That's actually a very important thing, because depending on how you deploy your terrain. So if you have impassable terrain on that, near that 8-inch center point, and there was a model nearby there, you can run into that wasn't able to move the marker. You can run into a situation where their marker doesn't get placed.
Got it.
It's happened to several times.
That makes sense. Then a model in base contact with the strategy marker can take an interact action and suffer up to 3 irreducible damage, ignoring hard to kill. A model, that's interesting.
Yeah.
A model may not suffer more damage than its current health. So you can still kill the model.
Yes.
The model can still kill itself, but if I only have 2 health left, I can't take 3 damage.
You can't take 3 damage.
Okay. Place the strategy marker anywhere within X inches of its current location, not in base contact with a model or impassable terrain, where X is equal to the amount of damage suffered by the interacting model, even if it was killed by the damage it suffered. So at the end of each turn, the crew gains 1 victory point if it has more strategy markers completely on the opponent's half of the table than it has victory points from the strategy. Wow.
This is, for me, the hardest strategy to deal with. And there's a multitude of reasons. So in Turf War, you have set stuff.
Yep.
In Plant Explosives, you know who carries the bomb.
Yep.
In Corrupted Idols, you have no idea where that marker is coming.
Well, you do, but you don't, because you can cheat initiative, right?
You can cheat initiative, and that's something that is really, really intriguing. And it makes the whole who's the active player really matter, because whoever had initiative previously is ties is the person who has to cheat first type thing. So it puts it in that really awkward situation where if you've got a 10 and your opponent flipped a 3 for initiative, and you're like, well, I'll pass. Well, now your opponent's got some really interesting options. Yeah. Because now you have a situation where, do I cheat lower because I want to put that marker somewhere else? Mm-hmm. So it opens up some very interesting things, especially with Mawtucket, who gets benefits off of the initiative. So it's a really cool choice, and the fact that they can pop on the same location twice is really hard, because if you deploy incorrectly and you deploy it on the right flank, and then all the markers on the left flank in the center, that's a mess up.
That's a problem.
That's a problem.
So there's a total of potentially 5 markers, right?
Potentially 5.
One of each on each turn, but you can't score on turn 1.
Can't score on turn 1.
Coming into turn 2, when I can score, barring some strangeness, I'll have 2 markers.
You'll have 2 markers on the table.
Got it. And they could be right next to each other.
Oh, they absolutely could be.
Very,
it's not.
cool.
I've seen the center one drop twice, and then it's a big scrum in the center. And then the other thing, it's we can talk for literally hours about the counterplays for trying to deal with where they get placed. But the other really big thing is that you got to take damage to move them.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's you've got to bring a crew that, again, back to what you were talking about that you love to play explosives. It's mobile. It's tanky. It's killy, so you can try to deny your opponent hit points.
Healing.
Because hit points are now a resource.
Yeah.
They're always kind of a resource, but now health is really a resource here because it's how you score.
Yep.
And it's a really interesting strategy that really changes how you play the game.
It's cool. Very, very cool. All right, the last one, Reckoning. This is the one on the Crow. At the end of each turn, a crew gains 1 victory point if more enemy models were killed that turn than it has scored VP for the strategy. If there are no more enemy models in play, or if there's no more enemy models in play. For the purpose of this strategy, enemy leaders and masters each count as 3 models when killed. Definitely the simplest one.
Absolutely.
Not a wall of text. And we've seen, in previous editions of the game, we've seen lots of different versions of Reckoning. But and this is still killing. It's interesting because it's not killing more than your opponent, which is usually what you would see.
It's killing against yourself, really.
Right. So you're ramping up, and you've got to space it out.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because killing 4 models turn 2 does you no good.
Unless you're going to table your opponent. Unless the goal is to table your opponent. And that can be really hard if you pick the wrong targets.
Right.
Again, going to 10 Thunders because it's the well I know that I have the most information on. Kitty Dumont is an incredibly mobile model, or Yan Lo is an incredibly mobile model. And it's if that's kind of your last model, you might be in a situation where you're never going to catch me.
Right.
And so now you have no targets to kill, and I'm just going to dance around the board. Yeah, I'm not going to score any points, and maybe that's how you win.
Right.
But it's this goes back to the intelligent killing concept. It's you've got to pick your targets carefully. You got to whittle targets down carefully. And again, it comes back to the versatility concept, where it's you need tank, you need kill, healing's nice, condition removal. People trying to neutralize your kill models, because if they can neutralize what model you're using to do the killing, then they aren't under as much pressure.
Got it. And why condition removal?
So distracted and injured are 2 of the biggest conditions to deal with. Right, distracted, injured, and stunned.
Right.
Are the 3 really big conditions right now. Slow's still around, poison burning, and they still matter. They really do. But when you talk about Reckoning, which is such a kill-oriented scheme, your distracted puts you on negatives to attack, which means you're losing action points to either focus, to rectify that, or have someone assist to remove it. Yeah. So either way, it's an action point disadvantage. Injured puts you on negatives 2 duels until you end your activation.
Okay.
Or until your next activation, excuse me. So that reduces, your ability to survive. And then stun just flat out says no triggers, no bonus actions, which is massively powerful. And it can really cripple certain models.
Yeah, and the fact that you get 3 point, or they count as 3, the masters and leaders.
Don't bring squishy.
Yeah, that's definitely going to impact your decision making.
Yeah, absolutely.
Both who you decide to bring your leader, and whether you decide to bring a second master.
Yeah,
very interesting.
That's definitely a thing.
So that's the strategies. Let's take a second, and then we'll jump into schemes. All right, so let's talk schemes. So there's a total of 13 schemes, 1 for each number in your Fate deck.
Yep.
And you end up with a pool of 5, and they'll all be unique, obviously. And the way the schemes work is there are 2 points available. You get a point for the reveal and a point for the end. So as we go through these, we're going to talk about the point you get for the first part, which is the reveal, and the end. Now, you can score the end without the reveal?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, let's read through it, because I think there might be some where you can do that, but let's check it out. So first, detonate charge. On the reveal, at the start of the turn, if you have at least 2 friendly scheme markers within 2 inches of the same enemy model, you may reveal the scheme and remove 2 such scheme markers to gain 1 victory point. So I've got to get 2 markers near you.
Right.
And it has to be within 2 inches of the same enemy model, but they have to be 4 inches from each other.
Yeah.
Right, because that's one of the.
That's just the base rule.
That's just the basic rules.
Yeah.
So, not easy, but not impossible.
No, it's not really hard. I think the hardest thing about it is that there's not as many pushes.
Right.
In that I've seen so far, and like bells, just do a move, and dead doxies just do a move, and those are kind of like two of the big pushers. There's a lot of lures in 10 Thunders. There's some repositioning in Bayou, but it's just not an extremely prevalent mechanic. So setting up the whole thing of like, I'm just going to drop 2 ski markers here and just lure somebody all the way over here. It's like some factions can do it. I guess actually a better way to phrase it would be some keywords can do it pretty easily. But by and large, it's a little bit tougher than just that.
So to get the second point, your end. At the end of the game, if you have at least 2 friendly scheme markers within 2 inches of the same enemy model, you may remove 2 such scheme markers to gain 1 victory point. So it's the same thing as the reveal. The big difference being is now my opponent knows.
Right. Absolutely.
Which makes that second
point that second point a lot harder.
Right.
It's like, oh, what's that? Those scheme markers over there. I'm not going to get anywhere near that. And then, of course, with pass tokens, the whole out activation thing, the only way to get really out activated at the moment is through using pass tokens for something besides passing, which a couple of crews do, or killing a model that hasn't activated in a turn. Like that will give you activation advantage.
Gotcha.
But those are really the only 2 ways. So it's like, it's not like you can like sneak like I'll just move these guys around and wait till you're done activating, and then I'm going to score my end game. Like, when you're getting to that end game, everyone knows we're getting to end game. So that's just not going to happen. I'll be like, no, I'm going to pass. You're not getting that free point.
Yep. And I mean, you almost have to do it on a model that's already activated. Otherwise, he's just going to activate and run away.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, even if you engage, like disengaging, it's like you'd have to engage in a very specific way to prevent the push out from being able to. Because I mean, you flip weak damage on that push out. It's only 2 inches off. That guy's got a 4-inch move. I mean, suddenly you're not scoring anything.
Yeah.
You know, and this is one of those situations. In it, you are right. It's you can reveal schemes at the end of the game if they haven't been revealed prior. It's just the key is that you can only score 1 point a turn.
Right.
So you can't try to double up on that. But in this particular situation, it's the same reveal or end. It doesn't really matter. It's like you either scored 2 points, you scored 1. It's the same stuff. And a couple of the schemes do that, where it's the same thing both.
All right, let's talk breakthrough. This is number 2. At the end of the turn, if you have 1 or more friendly scheme markers and a friendly model in the enemy deployment zone, and there are no enemy models within 3 inches of that model, you may reveal this scheme or remove 1 such scheme marker to gain 1 VP. Wow.
Yeah.
So I've got to get across the board into your deployment zone. I got to drop a marker.
Yep.
I need to then keep my model there.
Oh, yeah.
And
no
that
enemies.
Model can't be within 3 inches of any enemy.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
a short list.
Tough.
It's a short.
That's tough.
So super easy to do. And actually, strangely, I'm not lying. It's actually a lot easier to do than some people think, because getting a model to kind of punch through on a flank is not necessarily hard, and it's kind of this one's on your opponent.
Right.
If you're threatening breakthrough and it's in the scheme pool and your opponent's not reacting to that, that's kind of on them.
Yep.
There are some models out there that just be like, I don't really care. Like, again, going to the obvious models like Masaki or Colette, who like they can just bury and then pop up where the heck they want to. Those types of models, it's a lot harder to be able to predict what's going to happen there. But even then, it's up to your opponent to be like, I'm going to try to guard against this scheme, or I'm not going to try to guard against this scheme. And that really is just about positioning and the opposing crew, and whether or not splitting your forces like that is too detrimental.
As valuable as getting points are, which it sounds a little silly at first, but it's hard to get points.
Oh, absolutely.
So just saying, I'm going to let them have the point, you kind of can't do that. You have to really...
Losing a game by 1 point is not an uncommon thing, and it's, getting outplayed on that critical turn's not an uncommon thing. So making that decision, you got to weigh it. You got to weigh out that decision.
So let's talk about the end. At the end of the game, so... the reveal can happen at the end of any turn. At the end of the game, if you have at least 3 friendly scheme markers in the enemy deployment zone, you may reveal 3 such enemy scheme markers and gain 1 VP. So, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Pretty easy. You just got to get 3 markers down there and in the zone, and obviously they have to be at least 4 inches apart.
Right. And that's the hard part.
Barring anything else that drops scheme markers.
That's the hard part, because when you think about it, like let's say you're committing a single model to breakthrough. That model's got to get over to your enemy's deployment zone, which unless you're like in flank or maybe wedge in there at the tip of the wedge is actually fairly, it's going to take a turn or two.
Yep.
Then you got to drop a scheme marker there. That's going to get eaten for the reveal. And then now you got to drop 3 more over the turns 3, 4, 5. That means you basically have to drop marker, walk, drop marker, walk, drop marker, walk. And not be,
let it happen.
Yeah, your opponent's just got to let that happen.
Right.
So there's a little bit more than you got to do there. That is actually fairly hard to do.
It seems like saying I'm going to just use one model to get breakthroughs is a little tough.
Yeah, you definitely have to plan for it.
Okay, 3, harness the ley line. The reveal at the end of the turn, if you have 3 or more friendly scheme markers on the center line, you may reveal the scheme and remove 3 such scheme markers to gain a victory point. So that's pretty basic, right?
Pretty basic.
You drop 3 markers on the center line. You're only going to score this once for the reveal, so it doesn't have to all happen on the same turn. So I could theoretically drop 1 marker one turn, 2 more markers on the next turn, and then get it at the end of that turn. So at the end of the game, you have to have 3 or more friendly scheme markers on the center line, and you may remove them. So you got to do it again.
Yeah, you got to do it again. It's like detonating the charges. Doesn't matter if you do it for reveal or end. It's going to be the same concept regardless. And the hard part about this scheme, and all schemes, is when you do that reveal, it's going to be so hard to get that end game because spending 6 AP to score 2 victory points already, that's there's a lot of AP economy you got to take into account there. Assuming you don't have bonus actions or anything like that can expedite that.
Yep.
But again, disengaging, you can't interact. So it's like your opponent can start trying to deny you just by saying, I'm going to throw a model in your face, and now you can't interact because you got to disengage or kill me first before that model activates. So you just run into a situation where it's like playing the bluff game is probably the way to go, so that you can kind of like set up what you're going to do,
right? And
then just kind of like, all right, here's that first point, and then it's almost a win more situation where if you can get the second point, you've probably already got control of the game. But it's up to your opponent at that point. If they let you get into those positions or they're not careful about guarding a flank, you can sneak that out sometimes, and it makes a difference.
I'll tell you what it feels like, and again, you've played 3rd edition, I haven't, but what it feels like as I'm going through and reading this is, it was relatively important in previous editions to pay attention to the pool. Yeah. Right, when schemes weren't revealed, you didn't know what your opponent had for schemes. Right. You'd have to pay attention to the pool. Here, it seems critical.
Oh, it's absolutely critical, and the meta play is really, really important here because the games are tighter, the points are harder. And so if you can properly deduce what your opponent's doing, or if you can properly bluff your opponent, you are so up in that game just from that knowledge there. So and that comes down to that crew selection too. Like if you look at opponent's crew and go, that crew's not very mobile, so they're probably not going to take these 2 schemes. They're probably going to take one of these 3 schemes. Now you already know what you're going to have to start trying to deny. And like we said a couple of times, generally speaking, that first point is pretty easy to do. Second point's really hard.
And the second point's what's going to win you the game.
Second point's what's going to win you the game.
All right, number 4, search the ruins. On the reveal, at the end of the turn, if you have at least 2 friendly scheme markers on the opponent's table half, each in base contact with a different piece of terrain, you may reveal this scheme and remove 2 such scheme markers to gain 1 victory point. So what's interesting to me about that is this is really, like, when I'm looking at the board and deciding which table half I want, it matters, right? And
absolutely.
Would I want more terrain on my side or less terrain on my side?
It's hard to say, and it's going to depend on the terrain, really, is what's going to come down to. It's like you got to make... It factors more into your decision-making, though, when you do that. Normally, when you're trying to pick sides, what you're looking at is, like, if you're a ranged crew, for instance, you're looking for shooting alleys. If you're a melee crew, you're looking for killing fields. Stuff like that. And what you now have to look for is, like, is there so much terrain on my side of the table that it makes this easy for my opponent? Because the easiest terrain to score this off of is terrain on the center line.
Right.
Because it's right there. You don't have to go far into your opponent's terrain, and you can drop the marker on the center line in base contact with that terrain, and it still counts.
Got it.
So this is actually one of my favorite schemes to play because of the fact that in Malifaux there's normally enough terrain on the table that you've got plenty of options to do, and I like to backfield a lot. And there's normally, when we set up terrain tables, not everybody does this, but when we set up terrain tables, we'll have terrain that's in the backfield that doesn't actually typically enter play, because that's not where the action's going to happen. But it's there almost for aesthetics and just kind of completion. Well, now it's not just there for that. Now it's like if there's a piece of terrain in the backfield, I might send a scheme runner down there just to drop a marker down.
Well, and a lot of the strategies, when we're talking about the strategies, are pushing me to that side of the table anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's interesting. Absolutely. That's very interesting. The end condition. At the end of the game, if you have at least 3 different friendly scheme markers on the opponent's table half, each in base contact with a different piece of terrain, you may remove 3 such scheme markers to gain 1 VP.
So, reveal +1.
Yep.
Pretty straightforward. Same thing applies here. But again,
They know what you're doing.
They know what you're doing now.
Yep.
So it's like that marker you might have dropped and didn't pick up for the reveal. They're like, oh, I got to go get that now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk number 5, Dig the Graves. After killing an enemy model within 1 inch of 1 or more friendly scheme markers, you may reveal the scheme or remove 1 such scheme marker to gain 1 VP. So I've got to kill somebody near one of my markers, and not a little bit near, very near, within
an inch. So it's definitely something that's premeditated.
Right.
It's not one of those, and this doesn't seem. It sounds like this might be hard, but when you think about it, there's not a lot of 2-inch melee ranges.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of 1 inch and a lot of zeros. And then a 0 being base to base. So it's like you run into situations where as long as you're not sending a super high reach model there, you can have 2 models that have a 1-inch reach outside of each other's engagement, drop a scheme marker, and then charge and go for the kill. So it's not as hard as it sounds, but at the same point in time, if you drop a scheme marker next to an enemy model and they haven't activated, they know it's coming.
Right.
Right. But what's great about this scheme, though, what I love actually about this scheme, is it's a great bluff scheme. This is a great scheme to be like comboed with like Harness or Search the Ruins or Detonate Charges and just be like, I dropped a scheme marker, what is this for?
Yep.
And if they're going to try to call your bluff on one of those things, it might not be, and it might be Dig their Graves, and now they're in a little bit of hurt. So that's just about that meta awareness about your pool, and like you see your opponent engineering stuff, you gotta be like, are you trying to fake me out? What's going on?
Well, and you've got the bluff aspect, but the other aspect of it is you have, you can only use 1 scheme marker for each thing, so you have potentially competing, competing objectives, or competing schemes if you're not careful. Where you need this marker to do 2 things, you can only do 1 thing. And again, for most models, they can't drop scheme markers within 4 inches of another one, so that's tough. That's tough.
But the one positive about that though is that because you're only trying to score 2 points per scheme, you have a little bit of flux there. So if you drop a scheme marker and you really need it for 2 schemes, as long as it's not like turn 4 or 5 type thing where you're running out of time there, you can usually recover from that.
Got it. So at the end of the game, if you have at least 3 different scheme markers within 1 inch of 3 different corpse or scrap markers, you may remove 3 such scheme markers to gain 1 VP. So that's interesting. It's very different than the reveal here. And I could have not scored the reveal, and at the end of the game, I can score it. The other thing that's interesting is, sometimes when you start the game off, and a model dies, you go, any of your crew use scrap markers? Does any of your crew use corpse markers? It looks like we need to do that pretty much every game, but definitely when Dig Your Graves is in play.
Yeah, and that's a thing, and that's a hard thing to talk about too. In a certain point, I had this happen in a game just recently where I was playing against someone Dig Their Graves were in the pool, and we did that. We did the obligatory. Do you need them? And I was like, well, actually, Dig's in the pool. We should drop these. And it's like, that almost telegraphs if you have it or not.
Right. If you have
to know, I need you to drop that corpse or scrap marker. It's like, oh, okay, I know what you've got.
Well, we almost, I think, need to probably get in the habit of at the beginning of the game saying, by the way, Dig's in the pool. So we got to make sure.
We got to do that so that there's no, and it's 2 ways, so that someone's not trying to bluff you by going, no, I need that corpse. And you're like, oh, you've got Dig Their Graves, and they're totally faking you out.
Yeah.
But the thing I really like most about Dig Their Graves, we saw this a little bit in Search the Ruins. And in Breakthrough, the variation between the reveal and the end. I really like that, because if you run into a situation where you can't kill things, but you're getting killed, you can still score a point off Dig Their Graves.
All right, number 6, hold up the forces. For the reveal, at the end of the turn, if you have at least 2 friendly models, each engaging a different enemy model with a higher cost than itself, you may reveal the scheme to gain 1 victory point. So I need two things engaged.
Yep.
Each of those models have to have a lower, not equal, a lower
cost than whatever
they're engaged with. Then I get to score.
Yeah. This is the scheme that I have the most trouble with.
Yeah.
It is absolutely a devastatingly hard scheme to score, because you got to catch your opponent off guard and not die in the process. And it can be easy in some perspectives, but it depends on what your opponent brings. So you've always got one target, and that's the master, the leader. The leader is going to be anywhere between 11 to 16 points, depending on who it is. So you run into a situation there where you've got that one that you can get in, pretty much guaranteed. But then you've got that second one, and depending on what your opponent brought, that could be a lot harder to do.
Well, and putting a model next to a master is not normally a good idea.
Not normally a good idea at all. The one thing that's kind of interesting is that because we have a sliding kind of scale of master power levels, and it's kind of determined by their soulstone cost, there are some masters that are cheaper than others, and some, and by proxy, some that are more expensive. So we're into a situation where, like, you can throw a master up against another master, and it can count for this.
Interesting.
So I find that, like, Lynch comes to mind because he's only 11 soulstones, or I think Dreamer is also like 11 or 12 soulstones only. But you throw them up against anyone who's normal 15, and suddenly they count for hold up their forces. And then, like, if they've got a hench for 10, a last activation minion throwing in there can get you that second point. I think the hard part is doing it again, which I think is the end.
Yeah, and I think that you need to look at how their force is built and how your force is built, right?
Absolutely.
So if you're in a situation where your crew most of the models are tied or equal to their crew and stuff like that, it may not be the one to pick.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the end. At the end of the game, you have at least 2 friendly models, each engaged with a different enemy model with a higher cost. It's the same thing. Gain 1 VP, so you have to do it twice.
You got to do it twice, and that's what I'm saying. That second one's the hard one. Like, you can kind of get that first one, you can force that through, you can brute that through. But once you reveal it, they're going to be like, oh, that's not happening again.
Yeah.
And now you've got to get into, like, super positioning game because...
And you're running out of models.
You're running out of models. And it's like, the thing that kills me about this particular scheme is that it's not equal or greater. It's greater. And the 7 soulstone sweet spot, the 6-7 soulstone sweet spot, that really hurts that point because you bring that 7 soulstone model and your opponent's got his 7 soulstone models, like they aren't going to count for each other. So it's like you got to go against something higher, and that's dangerous.
It's good. I like it.
Yeah.
All right, 7. Take prisoner. At the beginning of the game, secretly choose an enemy minion. For the reveal, at the end of the turn, if you have a friendly model engaging the secretly chosen model, and there are no other enemy models within 4 inches of the secretly chosen model, you may reveal this scheme to gain 1 victory point. So I pick a target.
Yep.
I've got to engage the target.
Yep.
It doesn't say I could have multiple ones, right? Not just one friendly model, a friendly model, so I could have 2.
Yep.
But
matter.
The key is that he has to be somewhat isolated, that enemy model.
It's got to be a minion that is somewhat isolated.
Sure enough,
yeah. It's got to be a minion, and that's the hard part.
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal. Like, especially like someone like me, I like to play elite crews.
Yeah,
and it's not. Sometimes I will bring a crew that has no minions, and that scheme's just flat out denied.
Sure, or even if there's just 2 minions, you're drastically reduced
pool there. So it's like that's one of those schemes that you can build your crew to deny fairly easily. And the other thing about that's interesting is, again, we've mentioned this a couple of times, the lack of pushes.
Yeah.
There's not as many of those as you might want to do a scheme like this. So you've got to pay attention to what you're trying to do. And of course, there's a couple of masters that it's kind of an auto thing. Yoku, the new 10th Thunder master, Seamus with his bells.
Yeah,
they're going to have the movement to be able to isolate one of your minions if you're not too careful with it. But it's, again, just kind of one of those things where you got to play that meta and be like, all right, take prisoners in the pool. Where are my minions? How am I going to use these guys?
Yeah, very interesting. At the end of the game, if you have a friendly model engaging the secretly chosen model, or if the secretly chosen model was killed by an enemy model after the scheme was revealed, gain 1 victory point. So, scheme has been revealed, which means I've already gotten a point off of it.
Yep.
If the enemy kills that model
to try to deny
it, then I get the point.
Yeah, and that's the whole reason for that clause, is because that's something that, like, comes up a lot, is like, I'll
just kill him.
You need this model alive for whatever you're trying to do. Well, I'll just eat that model. It's like, that's a very common tactic in miniature games in general, or in gaming in general. It's a common tactic, the sacrificial pawn concept.
Yeah.
And so this says, nope, can't do that. You got to leave them up.
And you got if you're having this played against you, you just got to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, literally. You just literally have to get out. And sometimes that's just not easy to do.
Yeah.
So sometimes it is.
All right, 8, Power Ritual. Reveal is at the end of the turn. If you have a friendly scheme marker within 3 inches of a table corner, not part of your deployment zone, you may reveal the scheme to remove that scheme marker to gain 1 victory point. So basically, get out of your deployment zone, drop a scheme marker within 3 inches of the table corner, and now the table corner has to be not part of your deployment zone.
Yes.
As opposed to not dropping it in your deployment zone. So it really pushes you to the other side of the board.
It really does. So
Yep.
we have the 4 deployments. We have the wedge, flank, standard, corner. So corner and flank still have the, don't traipse into the other corners. So you have 3 corners that you can possibly tag. So this scheme is much easier to score in those 2 scenarios. But when you're doing standard or wedge, the wedge hits 2 corners, your standard hits 2 corners, so that means you're going to your opponent's deployment zone.
Yeah, now in wedge, which I still have 2 available to me.
Yes, you still have 2 available
got
to
it. Got it. So at the end of the game, if you have at least 3 different friendly scheme markers within 3 inches of 3 different table corners, and no more than one of those scheme markers is in your deployment zone, you may remove these scheme markers to gain 1 VP. So you got to get 2 more markers down.
2 more markers. Well, 3 more markers because it's going to pick it up.
Yep,
it's going to pick it up on the first one.
But again, I guess you would always score the reveal before the end here.
Yeah.
So okay.
More likely than not, because it's going to be easier to do that than it's going to be to do the other
both's a point. So.
Right, both get you a point. The key for this one is that they were nice enough to add the clause that 1 can be in your deployment zone, so you can prep that one.
Yep.
So in wedge and standard deployment, you can have a model drop 1 in a corner, even as a bluff, which I still think is a great option. You bluff power ritual, and then you send someone down a flank. And it's especially if breakthroughs in the pool, that's just that's a target that your opponent's I cannot ignore that. They literally can't, because they're potentially throwing away 2 to 4 points by ignoring that model. So it's a really great way to kind of split your opponent's attention, and especially if you're not actually doing it and that is a sacrificial model, you've just kind of weighed things a little bit more in your favor.
All right, let's talk about number 9, outflank. For the reveals, at the end of the turn, if you have 2 models, each within 3 inches of where the center line meets a different table edge or corner, you may reveal this scheme to gain 1 victory point. So you've got to go out, right?
Yeah, you've got to go out.
You have to head out to the center line, which is center line being different than the deployment zones, obviously. But the deployment zones determine whether it's a diagonal or center line or not.
Yep.
And they've got to go out there. There's no other restrictions, so they can be engaged, and so on and so forth. So relatively easy.
Yeah.
So when you see it happening,
it's super telegraphed.
Yeah.
Again, this is a good scheme that's best paired with another scheme that requires you to be spread apart, like a Search the Ruins or Harness the Ley Line. Not necessarily to take it with it, but just to be able to bluff it. So, if you go for the outflank and, really what you're doing is Search the Ruins, you can kind of redirect your guys after your opponent tries to split off after you. But and there's no NDA, so I can say this. In the beta, you had to do it without enemies being nearby, and that was super hard.
Yeah, I bet.
That was super hard. So I like this version a lot better, where it's just you got to get there, because it's already hard enough. Depending on what scheme you're doing. If you're doing corner, for instance, this scheme's a nightmare to do, because you just got to waste so much AP to get up there, and it forces you into certain builds. And again, that mobility positioning becomes paramount one more time.
Boy, you have to, and this is something that we'll talk about at the end. I'm getting excited, because remember, I haven't played yet. And
you need to.
This is
so good.
Oh, if there's one thing that I loved about Malifaux from the beginning, and where I think Wyrd has kept themselves above all other war games, is what we're talking about right now, is the schemes and the strategies.
Absolutely.
And that whole concept of the pool and just the way that they did scoring. You don't see anything like this. And I have to say, and we've only got a couple more left, they've really taken it to another level here. This, I can tell you right now, after playing 3 years of Malifaux, these are better than any of the gaining ground combinations I've seen. Just structurally, there's some really good decisions here. But I'm getting distracted here, so let's talk.
Be excited.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Let's talk 10, assassinate.
Yeah.
The reveal at the end of the turn.
One of my favorites.
If the enemy leader is in play and has half of its maximum health or less, you may reveal the scheme to gain 1 victory point. So
go ahead and read the end one, because it just ties in directly.
And the end is at the end of the game. If the enemy leader is not in play, you gain a victory point.
Yeah. So this is just flat out, just go forth and murder.
Interesting.
And what I love about this scheme is you can't have your master sit back in this in M3e. You got to get up. You got to get to your opponent's side of the table. We've discussed this. It's been brought up time and again in the strategies and the scheme. Pushing to your opponent's half of the table to get stuff done. So your master is not going to be sitting in the backfield going, heebity.
Right.
He's got to get up and he's got to do his job. He's got to support your crew, or he's got to lead your crew, or, you know, she's got to go and murder those things, or, you know, whatever the case may be. Lady J's got to come down and bring the sword of vengeance on everything.
Yeah.
So this scheme I love because it makes it turns the aggression dial up to 11. And in a situation where we're already needing to mix it up so aggressively, just to accomplish our normal strats and schemes, adding in that extra fear of what happens if I take, you know, one too many shots on my leader. Is my opponent going to score an extra point for assassinate? Because I got to tell you, there are a couple of times, especially like when I play Asami, because her totem gets an upgrade when she dies that turns them into a super totem. And I'll let her die.
Right.
And like you can't do that with Assassinate, obviously.
No.
So it just it gives you, again, just another little thing to think about. And I like the threat. Though I will say it makes Colette like, you know, almost an auto take into an Assassinate.
If that's in the pool.
Yeah, because she's like unkillable.
Well, the one thing I think is interesting, though, and this goes into with Colette and Masaki and stuff like that, is at the end of the game, it's not that did you kill the master.
Yeah, it's are they in play.
Is the master in play, which, you know, can be... that you could potentially get that point and the master's still alive, right?
Right, yeah, and like you got to be careful about that. And it's like, and fortunately those abilities are controlled by the owner, so you got to not be paying attention. But if you're not paying attention,
and buried is not considered in play.
No.
So things like pine boxings could be potentially a thing, right?
I believe that is correct. I'm pretty certain that you still get to activate the model, but it's not counted as being in play.
Interesting. No. All right, number 11, we're almost done. Deliver a message. At the beginning of the game, secretly choose an enemy leader or master. Reveal. During its act... Well, let's talk about that real quick. At the beginning of the game, secretly choose an enemy leader or master. And it took me a second to realize why does that matter. It's because you can have multiple masters.
Yeah.
So if someone brings two masters, I could choose either one. The one that's the leader or the second or third master.
Or alternatively, if someone brings in a henchman as their leader, then you can still nominate the leader.
All right. During its activation, a friendly model within 1 inch of the secretly chosen model can take an interact action to target the secretly chosen model, even if the friendly model is engaged. If it does so, you may reveal the scheme to get 1 victory point. So you're delivering the message. You're running up to the chosen leader or master, and you're saying, here's the message.
So this scheme for me, if we were ranking schemes, this one would probably be one of the weaker schemes for me. Not because it's not a good scheme or anything like that, but because that first point is so easy to get.
Got it.
There's almost, like, you really have to be not paying attention to not deliver the message. Now, there are a couple of masters that I know I just was talking about that you really can't leave your master in the backfield, but there are some masters like the Zoraida, you know, or Dreamer, you know, Asami even, who are a little more mid-table to, you know, backed models, or Sonya comes to mind as well, you know, just that range blasty. They aren't getting too close.
Got it.
So in those particular situations, deliver the message can be a little bit harder, and then if you suddenly try to blitz a model in there, we're like, you got that. But for the masters that like to mix it up, it's like you got to be careful about that, because you dive in and do what you do, and then your opponent goes, thank you, here, have a message, I got a VP.
Yeah, and again, and this is something I like, is the fact that this being in the pool is going to impact my decision making.
Yes.
And as far as crew building, and it's also whether I pick it or not is going to be determined by what I see on the other side of the table.
Yeah, which has always been what Malifaux has been, you know, best about, is that kind of meta dynamic.
Yep.
And it's just the stuff they're doing with M3e is just reinforcing all of that.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about 12, claim jump.
No, let's do the end for deliver.
Oh, I'm sorry, the end on deliver a message. At the end of the game, if the secretly chosen model is still in play and within 2 inches of a friendly scheme marker, or if the secretly chosen model was killed by an enemy model after the scheme was revealed, gain 1 victory point. So a little bit different than the assassin. You got to kill it, or you've got to get it near a marker.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's potentially hard. Because again, they know that deliver the message has been revealed. They know that you've picked it. All right, so now 12, claim jump. At the beginning of the game, secretly choose a friendly non-leader model. Reveal. At the end of the turn, if there are no enemy models within 3 inches of the secretly chosen model, and the secretly chosen model is within 2 inches of the center point, you may reveal the scheme to gain 1 victory point. Oh, wow, okay.
There's a lot going on
So you got to pick one of your models.
Yep.
Can't be the leader.
Cannot be the leader.
And it has to be somewhat isolated, not within 3 inches of an enemy, and it has to be within 2 inches of the center point.
I have taken this scheme so many times, and I have failed to score a victory point off of it so many times, because it's really, really hard sometimes to judge when your opponent's going to go center.
Right.
And if claim jump's in the pool, you kind of have to assume at least something's coming center, but just how much is there. And that 3-inch to 2-inch range can really play havoc with you sometimes, because if they get a model up in that center point, you can't
it's not
score.
The center line.
Yeah, no.
It's the center point.
It's the center point of the table. So if they get within, I think it's something like within an inch of the center point, you can't score. Like, you physically cannot score because that 3-inch versus 2-inch reach, 2-inch range on the requirements prevents that.
Tough.
It's super tough.
I have to get to the center point, and I have to be there by myself.
You have to be there by yourself, basically.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and large base models just like say nope. Just nope to that. Like, I'm just going to drop Yasunori on the center of that table and say shift me, because unless you do, you're not scoring claim jump this whole game.
And the other key is I can't. It's not just a situation where I just get a model there. It has to be a specific model.
It has to be a specific model. And that's just another variable that just makes it tough.
So the end is at the end of the game, if the secretly chosen model is still in play and half or more of its maximum health and within 2 inches of the center point, gain 1 victory point. So it's got to live and it's got to be there.
Yeah. So this is where the whole thing of being able to score the second part without scoring the first part kind of really comes into play. And we didn't talk about this with Deliver the Message, but Deliver the Message is one of those things where you can do the same thing. Where it's like if you aren't ever actually able to get that message off, but you're able to drop the ski marker, kill the model, then you still get the point. Claim jump, same thing here. You may not have been able to get yourself isolated, but at the end of the game, if you're above half health and you're still in that center point, model or not, you're going to get that point.
Got it.
And so it's actually, strangely enough, I think it's easier to score the end point than it is to score the reveal point.
The end point. Yeah. Okay, last one, 13 Vendetta. At the beginning of the game, secretly choose a friendly non-totem model and an enemy non-leader model with a higher cost. So I pick one of my models, I pick one of your models, it has to be higher cost, and it can't be
totem or leader.
I can't be a totem, and you can't be a leader.
Yep, 100%.
So the reveal, at the end of the friendly model's activation, if it successfully dealt damage to the secretly chosen model and the enemy model has half its maximum health or less, but is still in play, you may reveal this scheme to gain 1 victory point. So now my model has got to hit your model. Your model has to be
either at half
or lower.
And
I get a victory
after the hit.
Got it.
So the thing that's really good about that is that it doesn't have to be the first model or anything like that.
Right.
You just have to get it past half.
At some point, I have to make that hit happen when you're at half or lower.
Right.
Okay. So at the end of the game, if the friendly model is in play and the enemy model is not, gain 1 victory point. So that's cool. I like that. I've got to survive, and you've got to be gone.
And what's really good about, and again, this goes back to with the claim jump deliver the message concept with the second part of the scheme versus the first part. The reveal can be hard to pull off sometimes, especially because if you spike damage and then you cheat it down because you don't want to kill the model, they're like, oh,
right,
I know what you want. And so you can deny at least one of the victory points by killing the model then. And we talked about the whole sack bomb thing for take prisoner. And that one's totally valid. Like, you'll give them up the point assuming you don't kill their vendetta nominee.
Right, you could still potentially deny it.
Yeah, you could still potentially deny it, but you at least absolutely deny that reveal.
Right.
And that's one of those things where it's just like, you got to be careful with what you're doing. But the benefit of the end point is that if they go and you spike a red joker damage or whatever, and they're like, all right, fine, I'm down to 2 hit points, you can still just kill that model and still get the 1 victory point as long as your vendetta nominee is still up. And that can be hard to kind of source out, because if you're in this situation where you got 4 other schemes you're trying to worry about, you're playing your 2 schemes, you're playing a strat, your opponent's not revealed one of their schemes, you might think it's a dead scheme, and you don't realize it's because that sniper in the back line that you've not gotten to at all was their vendetta nominee.
Yep.
So now they're going to get that 1 point, and you just didn't even know it was coming.
Yep.
So that's something that's actually kind of cool about the vendetta. Not being able to target leaders, not totally sold on that. I understand why.
Yep.
Because they're all 15, 16, so it's like you just be like, oh, my big beater Henshi Zamu or Enforcer Zamu is going to come through and murder you. But it is what it is. And again, this is one of those schemes that I talked a little bit earlier about, like when you for hold up their forces, that you get to that point where you're really struggling to find models that are within the cost range of the requirements that can get the job done.
Yeah.
And this is one of those situations where it's like for instance, for me, I build a lot of elite crews at times, and I don't have a model that's below 8 stones.
Yeah.
So now I have to go after a henchman, and that can be really hard sometimes.
Or you don't pick the scheme.
Or I just don't pick the scheme. Yeah. And it's like sometimes you're just pigeonholed into schemes. There's nothing really you can do about it. It's like you're like, oh well, all of these suck for what I brought.
Yeah.
You know, so you just got to kind of work with what you got.
That's good. All right. We'll be right back with our final thoughts. All right, so we'll start with me. I am excited to try these out. It's a little hard for me to get my brain around. I think I'm going to struggle when I get my first pool in front of me trying to figure it out. How interlocked all things are. I mean, each scheme is its own scheme. Each strategy is its own strategy, but I can already see a pool, how they interact with each other.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, that's very, very exciting. I think that when your opponent hasn't revealed his schemes yet, because of how interlocked they all are, it'll be a little tough, I think, to figure out how they're going to get that first point.
Yeah.
I like that there's some killy, some not killy. I like position. The positioning is interesting.
Yeah.
The strategies seem to have a very specific. You need to be in certain places on the board for things to happen.
Yeah.
Schemes are a lot more flexible, right? Things can happen at different points. Not all of them, but some of them. So I'm excited. I mean, you've played some games. What are your thoughts?
I really like it. Like initially, some of the early permutations that we went through in the closed beta, I wasn't as quite a big a fan of. But what the settling on the reveal in the end concept and the scaling strats, that's just, for me, that's money.
Yeah.
The scaling, what it does is it does two things. Number one, it makes games tighter, and like there's an argument to be had of they're going to be tighter because you're engineering it to be that way.
Right.
Because the first couple of points are easier to score. But I don't see a problem with that.
I don't either.
It's like, I don't have a problem with it being, or like people can be interactive in the game,
right,
and actually accomplish things, and where the victory is going to come from is going to be the strategy you employ to get the difficult points.
I would be very hesitant about how tight because you're right, it's engineered to be tight games.
Yes.
And I would have a problem with that if, and I can say this confidently just even reading them, and I'd assume you're going to back me up here, is the person who plays better is going to win.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you want to engineer a close game, but still have a game where the person who played the best that game is probably going to win.
Right.
I'm okay with that. I mean,
absolutely.
For all of the different war games that I've tried, the luck factor is the lowest in Malifaux.
Yeah, it really is.
And I just consistently, the person who plays better and it's not just pick the best crew. You can't pick a crew in Malifaux and win the game.
No.
In other war games, you can have won during crew building or army building.
Absolutely.
You can't just pick certain schemes and certain strategies and win the game.
No.
I mean, you have
to
to
engineer it.
Right crew. You have to play well. You have to control your resources. You have to make good decisions from the beginning to the end, and that's why it's my favorite game.
Yeah, absolutely, and I 100% agree with everything you just said there. For me, the big thing about this is that, and there might be some argument to be had here, depending on how competitive, what your viewpoint on competition is. I find I get people more excited about a game that they're not going to get.
Yeah.
I got scored 8 points, you scored 0.
Right.
Like when they feel that they've accomplished something in a game, you want to come back to it, even if you lost the game. And like the worst thing in the world, it's a term we get thrown around a lot, the whole MPE, the not positive experience. I feel like one of the benefits of how they've engineered the strat and the schemes to have closer games kind of helps reduce that a bit, because you're able to get a couple of points by just playing a solid game.
Yep.
And then if you get outdone because your opponent's better at the tactics, or they did better deployment, or they did better crew selection, or a combination of what it is, you still were able to do your thing. Yep. They just did theirs better. And I think that's a really good environment to play, and I think it's a good environment to be in.
Yeah, and the ramping nature of those strategies means, if I'm going into turn 3, turn 4, and I'm 1 or 2 points behind, it's going to be easier for me to get my points than it is for you to score that other point.
Right.
And I like that.
that. And still, you're still going to run into those situations where someone who is like a severely high skill level versus someone who maybe isn't, you're still going to get blowout games once in a while where someone does do the 8-1 or the 8-0 type thing. But I got to tell you, I've probably played about well over 30 beta games.
Mm-hmm.
I have not yet scored an 8-0 game.
That's good.
Yeah, I've gotten to 8 points multiple times. Most of my games, I've been 6-3, 7-4 type things, and that's kind of what we're talking about. Where like you get that kind of first point or two of the strategy, you get 1 or 2 points, you get 1 or 2 points from the reveal, or one half of your schemes, but getting the other half of your scheme, or getting those 3-4 points. And it's like, I find that the way I've been playing has been to try to deny the turn 3 strat.
Yep.
The turn 3 strat denial is really important for me, because if I can deny you a point there and then score a point on turn 3, that's a 2-point swing for me.
Yep.
And I feel that that's really, really, really critical. So that
could decide the game.
Yeah, that could absolutely decide the game. So that's kind of where I push my denial at the moment, is for that.
Great. So let us know in the comments. For those of you that have been playing, I want to know what you think about these different schemes. Is there certain schemes that you think are always picks? Are there schemes that you never would pick? Let us know if we made a mistake. Let us know in the comments as well, so we can get it fixed. Make sure you like and subscribe. We've got a lot more 3rd edition content to get out to you. So you're going to want to be notified when that happens. So make sure you hit the bell. Ray, it was a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Craig.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to rate and write a review on this podcast so we can find more people almost as cool as you are. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube by searching for Third Floor Wars. That's THIRD. We'll catch you next time on the 3rd floor.